Now, you've probably heard me say this before, but where you run to on the day of trouble tells me a lot about you, right? So you think about your days of trouble. Like, where did you run to in the last day of trouble? We're getting ready to celebrate the 3-year anniversary of a global day of trouble. But when you run to, like, where you run to on the day of trouble tells me something about you. It tells me where you think that salvation is, like what will save you, what will protect you. It tells me where you think your security is. So you think about the last time the day of trouble found you, where did you go? Now, one of the things that we see a lot of times in the Bible is especially in the Psalms, is that in the day of trouble, I sought you out, God. I sought you out. Why? Because I believe that's where you have, that's where salvation is. You're my protection. You're my fortress. You will both save me, you'll protect me, and you will deliver me. And so even the psalmist, where they run to on the day of trouble, tells us where they think protection and salvation runs. But have you ever noticed how the day of trouble seems to be sandwiched by sleepless nights? That your days of trouble lead to sleepless nights. And maybe actually you even had a sleepless night last night, and may the sermon grant you rest and sleep. Maybe like, I didn't sleep at all last night, but I'm going to fall asleep during the sermon. Man, then have rest. Wow, that's instant application. Instant application. That's next level. But what you do is like you lay awake and you think about all of the possibilities of your day of trouble. Do you know what it's like to lay awake? You think about, man, oh my gosh, you think about what's happening to me and then what's going to happen. You think about all the scenarios, and of all the scenarios, you also think about all the solutions to all those scenarios. So like there's 5 scenarios, and of those 5 scenarios, each scenario has about 3 different kinds of resolutions. Now, now we're up to 15 different scenarios. Now, if those 15 scenarios happen, then each one of those, this is how I'd respond in 2 different ways to each of the 15 different scenarios, and your brain just goes, why? Because the day of trouble often gives us these sleepless nights. They're sandwiched in. And if that wasn't enough, if the day of trouble wasn't enough, have you ever noticed then your sleepless nights bring you anxiety? Have you ever laid there in bed thinking like, I can't sleep? You can't sleep, why? Because you're anxious. And then you start getting anxious about your sleeplessness. I do the math. Okay, all right, if I fall asleep right now, I'll get 6 hours of sleep, 6 hours of solid sleep. All right, just fall asleep then, and then it's like, okay, stink. If I get 5 hours, okay, if I fall asleep right now, then I'll get 5 hours of solid sleep. And then you move to 4, you're like, well, that's not good. That's not good. I don't care how you slice that. That's not enough sleep. And so your sleepless nights, by these troubled days, they actually bring a greater anxiety. And I want you to know at least 2 truths this morning as we lead into this. And the first is that you're not alone. I mean, the not being able to sleep can feel so isolating. How many of you guys have had sleepless nights? You guys have sleepless nights? Yeah, okay, yeah. You're not alone. By the way, I'm not going to ask how many of you guys have never had sleepless nights, because then you would raise your hands and everyone else would hate you. They'll be like, yeah, because they didn't have any sleep and now they're angry and they're like, get them after service. Like, we're going to give them a sleepless night. Like, I'll give you something not to sleep about, right? But like, you're not alone. But when you're having a sleepless night, you can feel so isolated, especially if you're married. And you're thinking to yourself, well, I guess this doesn't bother them. I guess they can just rest. I think that, my world is falling apart. I've got 78 different scenarios that are happening, and they've got nothing. It can feel so frustrating and isolating, but you're not alone. Everybody, I've had many sleepless nights. So you're not alone, and the other thing I want you to know is that it's not new. It may be new to you, especially the first time you have a sleepless night. It may be new to you, but it's not a new thing. In fact, this morning we're going to look at a psalmist he's had a sleepless night. And what I want you to know is the psalm is very old. You know, this psalm is maybe 20, 25, 2,700 years old. There's been a lot of people that have met a lot of troubled days that have led to a plethora of sleepless nights. And so, if you get your Bibles, because it will not be up on the screen, if you get your Bibles or your phones, turn with me to Psalm 77. We're going to start in verse 1. I cry aloud to God, and he will hear me. In the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. When I remember God, I moan. When I meditate, my spirit faints. Let me read that again. I cry aloud to God, and he will hear me. In the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. When I remember God, I moan. When I meditate, my spirit faints. And so he says, this idea that I cry aloud to God, and he will hear me. Now this is a confidence. Now this is amazing because we believe as Christians, we believe that God hears our prayers. And we just take that for granted a lot of times. Like, God hears my prayers. But think about what we're saying. That the God of the universe, the one that we believe that he exists, that he's created everything and brought it all into existence, the 7 billion plus of us, he's brought it all into existence, and then all those who have gone before, all of the prayers that go up, that he hears them all. That in the quietness of your room, in your sleepless night, we believe that he hears your prayer. And a lot of times, by the way, that hearing of the prayer ought to bring great confidence, great comfort. But what's happening here? Something else is happening here. I cry to God, and he will hear me. But what's the problem here? The idea here is that I'm crying to him, and he's doing nothing. You see, that's the frustration. That's a place of desperation. See, the idea is that when we say, I've got great confidence and great hope because God hears my prayer, what's the idea? That he hears my prayer and that he's going to do something about it. He's going to answer me. So there's this point. Not only does he hear me, but he's going to do something about it. Now, when he hears us, and it appears to us that he does nothing about it, that is not hopeful. That brings up a whole nother level of despair and frustration. I mean, think about yourself. If you're married, and just for illustration purposes, you injure yourself, you roll your ankle, and so you are now on the ground, and you are upstairs, and you don't know what to do, so you cry out to your spouse, hey, help, help. I've rolled my ankle. I can't get up. Help. Nobody comes. And eventually, you get yourself up. Eventually, you hobble your way downstairs, and you find your spouse, and you go, oh my gosh, you'll never believe what happened. I was getting out of the shower, and I rolled my ankle, and I was up there like rolling around for like 10 minutes calling for help. Yeah, you never believe. He goes, oh, no, I heard you. Yeah, I heard you. Like, what do you mean you heard me? Oh, yeah, you were like, help, I can't get up. And I was like, oh, well, you'll figure it out eventually. I would tell you this, I submit to you this. You would not be encouraged. All of a sudden, your frustration and anger would go to another level. Because what your assumption was you just didn't hear me. Oh, the reason why you didn't do anything is because you didn't hear me. But to find out that they heard you and then did nothing, that would be the next level of frustration, would it not? See, he's saying, God, you hear me. I know you hear me. I've got great confidence you hear me. But the problem is there's a discouragement here is that you've you've done nothing. I mean, this is why he says, I remember God. Yeah, and I praise? No, I remember God and I moan. When I meditate, my spirit faints. He says that his hand is not stretched out without wearying. It's like basically I'm stretching out my hand, it's not getting tired. It's a way of saying like he would stretch out his hands to God in prayer. He says, my hand is not tired. I am not tired of reaching out to you. This is the reason why I haven't answered. The reason that there's not an answer is not because I've stopped praying. In fact, my hand is not wearied. I have not grown tired of calling out to you. I keep on calling out to you. The problem is when I remember you, I moan. I don't praise. And so is this discouragement. And the hard part in this discouragement, this despair, is that he's actually trying the things that I would tell people to try. You know, if someone's like, man, I'm having a hard day, Josh, and I would say, you know what you need to do? You need to remember the Lord and meditate. That's what he says. I remembered the Lord and I meditated. And my spirit grew faint and I moaned. And I would say, you know, if the day of trouble's found you, you need to remember God and you need to meditate. This guy would be like, yeah, I tried that. And here's the thing, what happens in the day of trouble, especially these sleepless nights here, is when you're trying the very thing that you ought to try and it's not working. See, when you try everything that you know how to try and it still does not work, it leads you to this feeling of powerlessness. I've tried everything. I can't sleep. You know, and everyone's got, you ever tried this? Have you tried this? And you're thinking, yeah. And you get enough of those sleepless nights and be, have you tried this? You snap. Yeah, I've tried that. Of course I tried that. It didn't work. And these are the places that we see of despair, of desperation, this feeling of powerlessness. By the way, the feeling of powerlessness is one of the things that will keep you up at night. It's one of the things that keeps the psalmist up at night here. He goes on in verse 4. He says this, you hold my eyelids open. You hold my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I consider the days of old, the years long ago. I said, let me remember my song of the night. Let me meditate in my heart. Then my spirit made a diligent search. You hold my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I consider the days of old, the years long ago. I said, let me remember my song in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. Then my spirit made a diligent search. And so he can't sleep. He can't speak. This is, by the way, powerlessness. Like everything's out of my control. I can't even sleep. By the way, when you not being able to sleep, that's why you want to feel powerless. Not sleeping will make you feel powerless. Why? You can't even control the very thing. Like when you're just by yourself, you can't control it. Your brain is out of control. The more you think about, I ought not to think about pink elephants, the more you think about pink elephants. You can't control it. And so this is what he says. So I would say, I'm going to make this diligent search. I tried everything, and all I've ended up with is this sense of powerlessness. If you try to command yourself to fall asleep, how'd that work? Not well. Okay, just sleep, like you're some sort of hypnotist. Sleep. No. Sleep. Okay, Josh, go to sleep. And so he has this powerlessness. And so what does he do? He first turns inward. This is what he says. He meditated and searched diligently. Whenever you're up sleepless, that's what you do. You meditate. You're searching diligently. And it sounds like this. You're asking questions like, what's happening to me? What's happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Like, what did I do? Like, what part of this is my problem? What am I going to do? What did I do? This is happening to me. What am I going to do? There's this diligent inward search. How will I respond? And so really a lot of times when you're up at night, this is what you're thinking through. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? How am I going to respond? This is what he's doing. I made a diligent search. And by the way, I want to say is that introspection is a good thing. Introspection is a really good thing. This idea that I'm going to look inward to figure out meaning, solutions, identity, value. I'm going to look inward. Introspection is a good thing. And actually, to give you an example of that, it's a bad thing to like lay awake at night and just think that your problems are everybody else's problems. If you lay awake at night and just go, you know what, what's happening to me, this is everybody else's fault, and none of it is my fault. That's probably not good. It is actually probably a good thing to spend some introspection. What part of this do I own? What part of this can I control? What part of this is like within my power? Like, what did I do? The introspection here is a good thing. The problem is that introspection, you can get stuck in introspection. And you know this. This is what happens is that you get stuck just trying to find this meaning. You turn inward with this introspection. What did I do? Why is this happening to me? What ought I to do? But you get stuck there. Introspection is a good thing. It's just not the ultimate thing. Introspection is a great thing. It's just not the paramount thing. It's not the apex. It's not the pinnacle. It's interesting because in our culture right now is that introspection is the goal. You look inward. That's where you get your identity. That's where you get your meaning. You get your value. You get your purpose. Is you look inward, 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 inward. So our culture has taken this introspection thing and then turned it into an idol. It's actually, I say it's a good thing. It's just not the ultimate thing. Charles Taylor wrote a very long, thick book called Secular Age, but in it, he's trying to understand this idea. What happened in the last 500 years? You went back 500 years to the 1500s. Believing in God was just, everyone believed in God. Now, different gods, yes, but everybody believed in God. His question is, how do we get to 500 years later where belief in God is optional? What's happened to the world? He's got a lot of things in there. One of the things he says, though, is that it used to be that we would, what's the purpose of life? That the purpose of life, like 500 years ago, the purpose of life is to live a life that is pleasing to God or the gods, right, depending on your religion. He says, but that's changed now. And part of what we do now is what's the purpose of life? Well, it's to find meaning and to have value and to enjoy life. I mean, even the fact that we think that life ought to be joyful is even a newer thought. So all that to be said is that he says that we usually look to God, right? So inward to God to find things like meaning and value and purpose. But then when we take God out of the picture, where do we turn that look for meaning, value, and purpose? He says, well, we turn internally. Once again, introspection is a good thing. It's just not the ultimate thing. In our culture today, we've made it the ultimate thing. That you look inward, and whatever you find inward, whatever you find inside, that's both authoritative and reality. And authority and reality and is unquestionable. You can't question that. You can't question that. And I go, well, okay, well, I got a problem because I've got a long history of deceiving myself. I think I ought to question, like, if I think something, I'm like, I deceive myself a lot. I think I should think about that more because my brain has a way of justifying things it ought not to justify. And so we've turned this internal thing that reality is internal. That's what introspection, when introspection becomes a God, then reality becomes internal. Now there's a difference. And the difference is this, is that the things can be real to you, but they are not reality. In fact, I'm going to be honest here, like most of what keeps you up at night is things that feel very real to you, but that are not reality. There was a hard distinction for me to realize is that what was inside of me was real, but not reality. Because that means that you don't actually have the best grasp on reality. And so there's this idea that we have this introspection, but when introspection becomes God, becomes ultimate, what it does is it leaves us in this place of where our reality becomes reality. And by the way, this is, when people ask, like, well, one of the reasons why has depression gone so like through the roof? Well, one of the reasons why depression has gone through the roof is because of this issue right here. Internal reality becomes reality. Right? So for a depressed person, if I feel worthless, not only is that my reality, but that is reality. I am worthless. Because I've been told you look inward for definition, meaning, purpose, value. And people are like, I looked in there, and it scared me. And they go, well, yeah, you just need to look deeper and harder. Because what you'll find there is truth. And so what the psalmist does here, he says, I looked inside. I did this introspection. And by the way, if you hear me on this, if you get stuck in introspection, the only place for you to end up is in a place of despair. Like our culture stuck in introspection. This is why we are a culture of despair. And so he starts with introspection, but then he moves from introspection of himself, to interrogation of God. Look at verse 7. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Has his steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has his anger shut up his compassion? Selah. And so he goes, I look back on these days. God, I remember these days are long ago, and where are you? And this is what he's saying in these verses. God, will you spurn forever and never again be favorable? Has your steadfast love forever ceased? Now, think about this question. Has your steadfast love forever ceased? What he's saying in this moment is that obviously it has ceased now. The question is, has it ceased forever? Will it ever return? What he's saying is it's obviously gone now. You're not favorable to me. I'm not experiencing your love. Your promises, have they ended all the time, so you're just done keeping your promises, God? Is that the deal? You're just done keeping promises and you decide to start with my life? Like he's just like, you know what? I've been keeping promises now for thousands of years, but then Josh came along and is like, you know what? I'm done keeping promises. You're on your own. Is that what we're facing here, God? Right? Have you forgotten? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Like one forgets his keys, his wallet. Where? But God, you said you were supposed to be gracious. Oh my gosh. Oh. Yes. Oh my gosh. What's today? Today's Sunday. Oh my gosh. I was supposed to be gracious to you yesterday. Why didn't you say something? God, have you forgotten to be gracious? Has your anger shut up? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? Has your anger moved to rage where you can't control now your actions and you've forgotten to be compassionate? And so he does this introspection. It leaves him of himself. It leaves him in despair. He does this interrogation of God, and it leaves him in even greater despair. And by the way, this introspection, interrogation of God, by the way, this is pretty much the transcript of all of your sleepless nights. What is happening to me? God, why aren't you? Why did that person say that? God, why can't you? God, did you hear that? Are you not listening anymore? God, where are you? I don't know what I'm going to do. God, what's going on? This is the transcript. This here, Psalm 77, verses 1 through 9, is the transcript of pretty much every sleepless night. Verse 10. Look what happens in verse 10, though. Then I said, I will appeal to this, to the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old, and I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. Do you see what he does there? Here's the shift. There's a shift in 10. He said, I said this, I will appeal to the years of the Most High, the right hand of the Most High. So I will appeal to this, the years of the right hand of the Most High. Now, in a lot of your translations, you'll probably actually see a little notation there. This is going to be super encouraging to you. because of the words, this can be translated in one of two ways. It can either be translated as the ESV translates it here, which is, I will appeal to this, to the years of the right hand of the Most High, the right hand, the hand of favor, the hand of power. I'm going to appeal to God's favor and power. Could be translated that way. You could probably have a little notation there that says, it could also be translated as, this is my grief, that the right hand of the Most High has changed. One is of hope and confidence. The other one is greater despair. These are one of these places in the Bible like, hey, so which one is it? Because that's a big difference, right? Is that I appeal to your right hand because of all that you have done, or I find grief in your right hand because I think your favor has changed. You've changed. And the ESV picks the I remember your works, largely because of what he does. But I think it's interesting is that there is this hope and grief, this confidence and sorrow. And even in the translation, it's like, yeah, it's this weird mix. It could be either. But did you see there's this shift, and we're going to see this shift, is that actually he's going to move in the following verses. He's going to move from being man-centered to then God-centered. In the first 6 verses, 20 times, in the first 6 verses, 20 times, he says either I, my, or mine. Other than what it's used here for the rest of the psalm, guess what's going to be absent? I, my, or mine. And we're going to see a whole lot of God, you, God, your people, God, the people that you have saved. He says, I'm going to make a shift here. And the shift is he's going to change the focus. The other shift is he's going to, what he was saying before, he says, I look back and I didn't see you. I look back and I didn't see you. God, I look back on my life and why didn't you and why won't you? He said, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to look back and I'm going to meditate on your works. See, before, there's 2 things that can happen in a sleepless night. We can meditate and think about all of the things that God has not done, which is what he's been doing. God, where are you? Why haven't you? Where's your compassion? Where's your love? Where's your favor? You can do that, or you can meditate on all of the things that God has done. He's saying, this is my shift. And so, by the way, this is the difference between what we think is Eastern meditation and Christian meditation. Eastern meditation seeks to empty the mind. Christian meditation seeks to empty the mind of the wrong things and fill the mind with the right things. And he says, I'm going to empty my mind. I've searched inward through introspection. I've interrogated you, but now I'm going to shift. I'm going to look to you and look to my past and look to the past of people to see actually how is it that you have worked. And look what happens in verse 13. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You have made known your might among the peoples. You with your arm redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. And so he shifts here. He says, I cannot speak, I cannot sleep. I'm powerless. And I'm going to change my focus. I'm going to change my focus to you, God, and the ways that you've worked in the past, because God, you are powerful. And you're going to see there's just so much power coming from God here. God, you are powerful. By the way, there's a difference between life being out of your control and life being out of God's control. right? There's a difference between our world being out of your control and the world being out of God's control. Our world most certainly is out of your control. Most certainly is out of your control. Your world is probably even out of your control, but maybe a little bit more in your control. But none of that is out of God's control. And he says this. He says that I remember. I remember this. I remember what you've done. He says in verse 15, you with your arm redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. Now, if you've been with us, I've been preaching through Genesis in the fall, and we've been talking about Jacob. We're going to talk about Joseph, but Jacob, his name is then changed into Israel. Israel then goes down into Egypt. Both Jacob and Joseph have favor down in Egypt, and during a famine, the famine drives them down to Egypt. But after they die, years go by, generations pass, the people of Israel are enslaved by the Egyptians. When Jacob and Joseph die, though, early on, there's still favor. They wanted to go back to where? The promised land, Israel. Do you know one of their requests was, don't bury me in Egypt. Don't let us be buried in Egypt. Did you know that when the Israelites came out of Egypt and then came into the promised land, that they came in with the bones of Jacob and Joseph and put them to rest where? In the promised land. He said, God, you redeemed. Years after they died, you redeemed them. You gave them rest. Their resting place was in the place that you had promised them. Oh God, your power to redeem, even beyond death, is with us. Would you redeem us? Would you redeem me in this way? Oh, holy God, who tells the story of redemption. And then the end of the psalm, verse 16. When the waters saw you, O God, when the waters saw you. I love that. When the waters saw you, O God, when the waters saw you, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled. The clouds poured out water. The skies gave forth thunder. Your arrows flashed on every side. The crash of your thunder was in the whirlwind. Your lightnings lighted up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your way was through the sea, your path through the great waters, yet your footprints were unseen. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. And I love this. It says that when the water saw you, when the water saw you, God, it trembled. Now we think of water as nice. We love the beach, love the ocean, love the sea for most of us. But in biblical times, and specifically in biblical poetry, open water is not a good thing. It's seen to be the source of evil and wickedness. The seas are seen as darkness, chaos. Lots of people would go out onto the sea and they would die, right? And so the ocean, when we think about, the ocean, wouldn't that be nice? They don't think, they think this is the source of chaos. This is the source of wickedness. And yet, God, when it hears your name, all of that chaos and wickedness, you know what it does? It trembles. When the waters hear your name, they tremble. And your path is what? Around the waters? The path is over the sea. The path pretends as if the sea doesn't even ever exist. No, what does he say? He says it. He says that your way was through the sea, your path through the great waters. That actually the path of God does not lead around the trouble. It does not lead over the trouble. Does not pretend as if the trouble doesn't exist, but actually goes right through it. Like Psalm 23, that even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they guide me. That even though I walk through, you know what most of your prayers at night are? God, would you walk me around the day of trouble? Would you just evaporate the day of trouble? By your cosmic powers, would you just zap the day of trouble? To be like, boom, doesn't exist. And God keeps on saying, I'm going to lead you through. I'm going to lead you through. I'm going to lead you through the seas. I'm going to lead you through the waters. And some of our sleepless nights are just because we don't want to go through them at all. Now, and he says, then lead us like a flock, like Aaron and Moses. Now, if you heard these words, they walked through the sea, and God, you led Aaron and Moses. If you know your Bible, most likely, what are you thinking of? You're thinking of the Exodus, right? The parting of the Red Sea. The parting of the Red Sea, as God was, what was he doing? He was delivering Israel out of slavery. And literally delivering them out of slavery by going through the sea, by parting the sea and then leading them through the sea. Do you know there's multiple ways that God could have got them out into the wilderness? I mean, he wasn't like, wow, what else are we going to do? I don't know. The only thing we have left is this parting of the sea business. He could have launched them, right? He could have just launched them across the sea, right? However he wanted to do that. He could have done anything he wanted to do. And what does he do? He parts the sea to lead them through the dark waters. And so if you're hearing this, you go, God, you delivered your people. You parted the waters and you delivered your people. You delivered them from slavery. You led them through the deep waters. Do you know there's another time when water parts? Actually, it's right before they come into the land of Israel. The Jordan parts. With the deliverance out of slavery, the water parts. With the redemption entering into the land, the water parts. And God is leading them through both. He's leading them both through the deliverance and the redemption. See, one of the questions that you have in a sleepless night is, God, will you deliver me? And God, will you redeem me? And what this psalmist is saying is I look at both of these pictures and I go, yes, yes. In the day of trouble, he will both deliver me and redeem me. He's not going to spare me the day of trouble, but in the day of trouble, he will deliver me and he will redeem me, just like he delivered Aaron and Moses, and just like he redeemed Joseph and Jacob. And then there's this, probably with the phrase that has weighed most heavily on me this week, is he says, yet your footprints were unseen. Unseen footprints. I look back and I don't even know if they're there. So I was talking with a pastor on Thursday about this passage, because this is what pastors talk about. Hey, what are you preaching on? What are you preaching on? I said, I'm preaching on 77. I said, actually, at the end, there's this unseen footprints. I said, I've never seen that before, which is ironic because it's unseen footprints. But I've never seen that before. Unseen footprints. And he says, I wonder if that's where the famous Footprints poem comes from. And I said, I thought that too. I said, but I don't think so. I said, because if you remember the story of the footprints, the poem, The Footprints, if you don't know it, I'm going to spoil it for you, or you can look it up later. But the idea is that there are these two footprints, these two sets of footprints, and then when times got tough, there's only one set of footprints. And so then the guy asks, goes, God, what's up? And the nice times, there's two sets of footprints, and the tough times, there's only one set of footprints. And he says, God says, no, that's the one set of footprints. That's where I carried you. Those are my footprints. So I said, I don't think so, because in that, you can still see the footprints. Like, you can see his footprints. This is unseen footprints. This is actually, I look back and I still don't see it. But hear me on this. Know this, is that you don't have to look back and see God's work to be able to look back and have confidence that he was at work. I think a lot of times we think to ourselves, well, I'm not going to believe it until I see it. I'm not going to believe it until I see it. So once I see it, then I'll believe it. Did you know that in your life, like now, as we speak, there is a plethora of unseen footprints? Like, by the way, there are seen footprints too. Like, I look back at my life and I go, there are ways, God, that you have worked, and I know it, and I can tell it, and I can see it. And God's like, yeah, those are the ones you can see. There's a whole nother set that you can't even see. That your life and these days of trouble are filled with unseen footprints. And so you don't have to see or know that God, so you don't have to see that God, how God is working to have confidence that he is. And I love the rhythm of this psalm. Where does it start? I can't sleep. I can't sleep. I looked inward with introspection. I looked outward to you, God, with interrogation. And I came to this place where I said, instead of looking at my life of God, why haven't you, God, I'm going to look for places that you already have. You know the danger, I think, is we go, well, why didn't I just start there? Why didn't you just start there, psalmist? You know, when you can't sleep, just start there. I go, no. Actually, I think the process is good. I'm glad that we get both parts of the process. I'm glad that Psalm 77 does not start in verse 10. Because I think actually 1 through 9 are very important. Because remember how I told you that if there's two dangers. The first danger is that you get stuck in introspection. If you get stuck in introspection, you will only end in despair. But if you never visit introspection, if introspection is never a thing, then you'll always end in denial. And both despair and denial are two different kinds of foolishness. And so if you never look inward, so I'm actually super glad. I looked in. God, what did I do? Is there something that I did? Is there something I can do differently? I go, that's an important part of the process. You just can't get stuck there. You get stuck there, you end in despair. You never go there, you end in denial. It's not my problem, God. This is your problem. What did you do wrong, God? You start there, not a good place to start. And so we see this psalmist, truth be told, like we actually are better equipped for the days of sleepless nights than the psalmist. He had sleepless nights. We have sleepless nights, but here's the difference. We are better equipped for our sleepless nights. Did you know that? I mean, he was doing sleepless night in a post-Exodus world. He goes, this is his Exodus, Aaron and Moses and Jacob and Joseph. He's talking about sleepless nights in a post-Exodus world. I go, here's the great news. Like, you get to think about the things that God has done. We get to think about all of the things that God has done. That not only do we live in a post-Exodus world, but we live in a post-resurrection world too. He says, oh man, God, like you led them in the wilderness. Would you lead me through the day of trouble? Would you lead me through the waters? And he's thinking post-Exodus world, but we actually live in a post-Exodus, post-resurrection world. In a world where Jesus has already conquered the grave. And what does Jesus say things to us like? He says, so what? He's the good shepherd? I mean, he's making a bold claim that the shepherd in Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And Jesus is saying, that's me. I'm the good shepherd. He says things of like, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you what? I'll give you rest. You know it. You've quoted that verse in the middle of the night. God, give me rest. And he says, yeah, come to me. Come to me as the good shepherd. I will lead and guide you as the good shepherd will. He says that he'll carry our burdens. Yeah, he lives in a post-Exodus world. We live in a post-resurrection world. Even this, there's like, God, where's your promises? God, where's your favor? God, where this? Jesus says things, I'm never going to leave you nor forsake you. I'm always with you. Tells us in Romans that even when we don't know to pray how we ought to pray, that the Spirit is interceding on our behalf. When you think of God and moan, when you meditate in your spirit and it faints, the Spirit is interceding on your behalf saying, here's what they're saying. Here's the prayer. Here's the prayer that they need. Those sleepless nights can feel isolating, like you're all alone, but you're not alone. This process is good, by the way. Introspection, asking God things, questions, and then landing on his goodness and looking for places to where he is. But I know this. If I often found is that the questions of what is happening to me, why is this happening, what am I going to do, it's actually the questions of the whats and the hows and the whys that keep me up at night. But it's the question of the who that brings me rest. May you continue to ask the questions in your sleepless nights of what, why, and who, why, and how. But may you not stop there. At some point, you need to get to the question of who. Who is it the one that leads me? Who is it the one that guides me? Who's the one that bears my burdens? Who is the one who will hold my day, not around, not over, not under, but actually through the day of trouble? And who is the one who will, in the day of trouble, who will redeem me and deliver me? For he's the one that I trust. And Jesus says that he's the one. May God grant you sleep. It says that God grants sleep to his beloved. May he grant you sleep. May in your sleepless nights, may you wrestle with him. May you look inward, may you look upward, and may you trust him. And may his Spirit give you rest. Let's pray. God, we thank you. We thank you. We thank you that you are the giver of rest. Jesus, we thank you that you are the good shepherd who leads us in the day of trouble. I just know that in this room is that there's some of us now that are going through the day of trouble who cannot sleep. God, I pray that you would give them rest, that the hours of the night would count doubly, that 4 hours of sleep would feel like 8, that you would bear the burdens. Jesus, we thank you that you'll never leave us nor forsake us, that you'll hold our hands through the day of trouble. And even though the day of trouble may lead to sleepless nights, we pray in those sleepless nights that you would comfort us, that you would calm our minds, that in our wrestling with our powerlessness, that you would remind us that you are the powerful one. And though the questions of what and why and how bring anxiety, may the question of who bring us rest. Oh, that you would grant us rest. We love you. We pray for these things in your name. Amen. Amen. God bless you.